Empty Man is a 2020 horror film released by 20th Century Fox with David Pryor making his directorial debut. It was a relatively unsuccessful film, commercially speaking. It was released with a $16 million budget, only grossed around $4 million domestically at the box office. And at first glance, it seems like one of those run-of-the-mill spooky thing in town, nabbing, gobbling up these teenagers. So why am I making a whole video about this? Well, I just sat down to check out The Empty Man last night, and I was quite surprised. At first, I was surprised by the 2-hour and 17-minute runtime, which generated an immediate eye roll from me. I just thought, oh gosh, I'm going to be sitting here with this long movie that's going to sit out and play out with this whole investigation where we all know, yeah, the monster did it. And then at the 11th hour, the hero's going to try to do some sort of supernatural shenanigans to stop the bad guy. Maybe he wins, but with these sorts of supernatural things, a lot of times it's up in the air as to what really happened. But I was incredibly surprised by what I actually saw. And after that, I've been down an Empty Man rabbit hole. I've watched interviews with some of the creators. I've seen what other people have to say about it. And I realized that this film has developed quite a robust following. And I want to talk about maybe why that is. So let's first discuss what The Empty Man is all about. And then I want to talk about how the 3-act structure of Empty Man really leads to a lot of its success.
And you find a bottle, you blow into it, and you think about the empty man.
So first of all, what is this Empty Man all about? So basically there's this idea of how you can summon this, I sort of think of it as like an extra-dimensional entity who can enter into our world, transmit signals, usually violent, disturbing signals, into people's brains and make them act in terrible ways. And this Empty Man goes about doing this through multiple people. Eventually, a former cop, our main character, stumbles into this whole web of Empty Man shenanigans, and he goes about trying to investigate what the Empty Man is all about, trying to stop this thing. He does piece it together much more quickly than you would assume, because as soon as he does, the film pivots and enters into this whole occult, shadowy doomsday organization, and it becomes a really different kind of film. The only thing I can kind of compare this to is one of the early Paranormal Activity entrants. Remember that one starring Catherine Newton where at the very end she discovered that there was this big cabal of witches who was causing all of these supernatural things going on? That's the closest thing I can liken this to, but even that does not even begin to do it justice. So I don't want to get into any major spoilers, just know that the detective goes down a rabbit hole, as you will when you see this film, and it leads to some very surprising places. I actually think the trailer gives a bit too much away, but I don't want to do that. So let's also talk about why the 3-act structure in Empty Man is so successful. So first of all, you've got Act 1, which is basically a prologue. We go to Bhutan, I believe, where there are these 4 hikers, backpackers. One of them falls into this hole and they see this supernatural entity, or at least signs of it. And this is what we would come to think the Empty Man is himself, perhaps his corpse, his remains, what have you. So we see this Empty Man and there's a story playing out with that group. Then immediately after that, we switch to the present day, to Missouri, the small town in Missouri, where this ex-cop gets embroiled in this investigation as to what's going on with this missing girl, this girl that he knows. And that's where we think, okay, that's where this is going to play out. The bulk of this is going to be about this cop hunting down this thing and then confronting it in some way. And in that section, the movie is somewhat reminiscent of things like Bye Bye Man, Slender Man, things like that. But it pivots right when we think we're moving towards a confrontation. It pivots to this entirely separate act, this 3rd act, where we go into this Pontifex Institute, and it's this doomsday cult that sort of worships the Empty Man. And it believes the Empty Man is this conduit into another reality where one's thoughts can manifest themselves into reality. And there's this concept of the tulpa. I don't want to give too much away, but it's this idea that you can literally manifest something into reality. And it's kind of, I don't want to get too head tripping on you, but it's based on this idea of sort of like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's allowed to hear it, does it make a sound? We are all generating our own separate realities. reality is not real according to the Pontifex Institute, but rather it's just a product of our own thoughts and our own manifestations. And there is some psychological credibility to this. We all see the world through the filter of our own lived experiences, and the world is as we interpret it. We don't see the world in actuality. We only see a filtered version of it through our eyes, which are like little tiny remote sensing devices that we use to interpret different rays in the electromagnetic spectrum to produce what we see. Everything we see, everything we hear is a product of ourselves and our own senses and our brain that's formulating all of this together. So this movie just takes that to a dramatic extreme, and it introduces a Slender Man-esque killer into it with this huge twist of this sort of doomsday cult. And it's these three separate acts that turn this sort of large, otherwise laborious 2-hour and 17-minute film. Gosh, that's so long for a horror film. A good horror film, I think, should be around an hour 30, hour 45 max. Get in, do what you have to do, and that's it. I was almost turned off on it because of the runtime, but this is Halloween, so I was on my Halloween binge, and I'm glad that I went down this rabbit hole because the film is so well paced that you barely realize how much time has gone by. And now, there is one exception. In the third and final act, it does kind of slow down because it gets very heady, very trippy. The main character keeps saying, hey, I'm from San Francisco. I know what this is all about. But even if you're from the West Coast or not, it gets very trippy. And you drag a little bit. You kind of feel the length there some. But for the most part, it keeps moving. And that long runtime is proof that David Pryor got to really bring his vision to life with minimal to no studio interference. This film was released during the pandemic. It was right before Disney acquired Fox. And it's one of those films that kind of fell between the cracks in a way. But in some way that was good because there was minimal studio meddling. And you can really tell that David Fincher got to fully realize his vision here. And the main thing I want you to think about with Empty Man is that it's a director fully doing what he intended to do. And yes, this is based on a graphic novel also called The Empty Man, but it is Fincher's own vision. It has great performances, and it's a horror film that goes big, like really big. And very few horror films have the budget or the vision or the time even to really do that while also telling a good horror story, also getting a few scares in and so forth. I wouldn't really call this a terribly scary movie. There are some segments that might freak you out a little bit. There's a shower segment that I think was a little bit gratuitous. I don't know if we needed that, but I don't want to give too much away. I just want to say this film is long, but this film is good. It's well paced, and give it a try. Empty Man, if you're not part of the cult of Empty Man, because it has become sort of a cult classic, you might want to think about joining that.